We're back with another episode of Palisade Radio. This is Colin Cattell. On the line with us today is a new guest to the program, Tommy Humphreys. Tommy's the founder and publisher of CEO.CA. Tommy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Colin. I enjoy your radio program, and it was great meeting you at the PDAC conference last week.
Yeah, so I was going to say, we ran into each other at PDAC, and you were walking the floor with Brent Cook. I saw you conducting an interview with Keith Newmeyer, really high-quality guys you surround yourself with, and that is reflected in your content. I remember you came on the scene about 2 or 3 years ago after releasing a sit-down interview with Doug Casey, and it was an exceptionally well-done interview, with Doug claiming it to be one of the better of his career. Before we get started, tell us a little bit about what you're trying to accomplish with CEO.CA and this really cool new messaging app that you've built.
Well, thanks for the compliment and opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're doing. That was I believe September 2010 when we did that interview with Casey, and frankly I just ran into him on the street in Vancouver, and it seemed like a good idea. I had a little bit of experience in blogging, and I was doing some web design work for Cambridge House, the investment conference company, and just thought, hey, why don't we try to do some interviews with some of these guys, because it seemed like good content to kind of rally the sector around, and so we just started with Doug, and it kind of trickled into this current iteration of my business and life, and which is running a website called CEO.CA. I never really intended to be doing junior mining blog, but I've had a few friends that owned the domain CEO.CA, and they had some car repairs, and I got a short window to buy it at a good price, and I was reluctant when I did that back in 2012 because the publishing business is tough, but bought it from them and have been just basically doing interviews with mining and energy and investment industry leaders in Canada since, and building out the site, and I'd say the bear market in junior mining and now energy stocks has been really good for us, and probably people like you too, because it opens a lot of doors when there aren't a lot of friendly voices and faces in the space. The access has been on our side because the market's just been so tough. So we run this website CEO.CA, which has some fresh content. The idea for almost daily. So the idea for me was just to bring the best of the better investment conferences on the internet, and the website version of what would a good investment conference feel like online, and that's what we've always sort of tried to do with the site, and it's it's getting a bit more serious as the weeks and months and years goes on, but we've been publishing daily, and in June of last year we started to join up with Lawrence Rolston's Resource Opportunities newsletter, and Lawrence was joining a private equity firm, so we had the opportunity to kind of merge our two platforms with his, and I've just been incrementally building out a small media business that's dedicated to exploration and discovery and development assets, and the website has always been really basic, just a simple WordPress template site. I realized that there were opportunities in internet and web space for the resources sector. So I started a process last year of trying to find some web development partners to maybe build out some of the ideas I had for the site, and got really fortunate to get linked up with this web development school here in Vancouver called Lighthouse Labs. It's doing some really exciting stuff, and ended up hiring one of their instructors, and now a couple of former students there, and we're building a sort of like a financial chat service for the Canadian stocks, but obviously with the strength in the resource sector. And that's called chat.ceo.ca. And once again, it's like trying to bring the best curated investment conference experience to your pocket and to your mobile phone. It's a mobile first application. We've got mostly newsletter writers, mining journalists and brokers, and geologists and analysts are using it to discuss discoveries in real time. And I'm really excited about bringing back kind of like a water cooler for the sector. I feel like in the old days, people were collaborating more. There was more discussion taking place with discoveries, more more investors were into it. Brokers were talking to each other. I felt like the last few years that's been missing. And so this application, chat.ceo.ca, is hopefully going to try to connect the space and give real-time context around new discoveries and hopefully make some people some money. But for me, it's become a really addictive little tool, and it's fun. So yeah, if you have any ideas on how we could make the service better, let me know.
Well, you've built quite a niche in the sector, and you're bringing technology into a sector that is generally, as you mentioned, stuck in the past. So I'm curious to see how that works out. I want to talk to you in this interview about some of these big guys that you've been sitting down with. You've done interviews with Lukas Lundin, Robert Friedland, Frank Giustra, Rick Rule, to name just a few. I thought it'd be interesting to find out what these guys are doing while investors are suffering. Of course, they're suffering to an extent. So let's start with Lukas Lundin. I know you've hung out with him, I believe, on his private island. You know his story pretty intimately. What is he doing at this point right now?
Lukas Lundin is in a bit of a different situation, I'd say, than your average junior resource investor, in that they've had, 40 years of successful speculations behind them, and they're billionaires. So they're putting their money where their mouth is. They've always been bullish on the commodity space, but as you probably have seen, they invested a couple $1 billion in their copper business to buy Candelaria asset in Chile, and also a desalination plant, a lot of infrastructure there. So they're building their copper business. They just built a nickel mine in Michigan with Lundin Mining. They created this gold company. Lundin Gold invested $100 million of the family's fortune to build out the Fruta del Norte asset in Ecuador. They're doing stuff all over the world, and it seems like almost every week one of the Lundin Group companies is announcing $100 million plus financing. So he thinks, and I was with him 10 days ago, he thinks the time is right to be making investments, and he has some credibility in saying that. I know he sold a lot of assets at the top of the cycle, and so hopefully he's setting up to do that again. And so obviously I'm excited to be watching what he's doing, and his time horizon is a little longer than ours. He's not much of a trader, and these are all 5 to 10 year bets for them, and I think you're going to see them continue to do extremely well. But they're backing incredible people, and they have the scientists and the engineers to make discoveries and to build them out, and their own capital to make all this stuff happen. I think for any resource promoter, it's a lot easier when you've got some of your own money to put into this stuff. So from the Lundin side, they're really taking advantage of this market. There's probably no better example of natural resource speculators and contrarians than them. I think everybody in the space envies their position, and I certainly do. Elsewhere, I think you've seen, people are. Ross Beaty is a good example of an extremely astute speculator that's starting to put some money to work. Mind you, he has a ton of money, so 30 or 20 or 30 or $40 million worth of bets isn't exactly betting the ranch for some of these guys. But I know Frank Giustra, who was very active in the last 4 decades of bull markets, or certainly 3.5. He tells me he's got his full technical team evaluating gold assets and wants to be in the gold space over the next few years. He's a director of Endeavor Mining, which I think is a 450,000 ounce a year producer already, but I know he'd like to do more. And and then the only other sort of the great tycoons from the past few decades to mention is probably Robert Friedland. And I thought if there was a Mount Rushmore for mining promoters, it would probably have Giustra, Friedland, Beaty, and Lundin carved into it. But Robert's portfolio of assets is incredible in scale and richness and grade, and unfortunately they're in South Africa and Congo, which are for a few reasons. Ivanhoe Mines, Friedland's biggest holding, is on the ropes a bit. It's certainly trading near all-time lows because the investors don't, as you know, they don't like projects that need more money, and Ivanhoe spends probably $10 million a month. And also South Africa and Congo are scary places to put your money. So I think it's tough for him. I think that there's a treasure box in that Ivanhoe Mines portfolio, and he's sort of got to weather the storm and got to keep putting his own cash in. But you see that all throughout the sector, whether it's through the titans of the business or just down to guys like us. It's running out of money to average down, right? So, coming back to discoveries and rising commodity price probably are required to, turn the fortunes for some of these guys. And so investment can then trickle out into new companies, new opportunities, new ideas. So we're certainly, we're still bouncing along the bottom, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. In meeting all of these guys, you had a report that you put together last year. I don't know if it's still out, but it was a great report called The 11 Laws of Billionaire Miners and Oilmen. And we don't have time to go through these 11 laws, but collectively looking at all of these guys, what is the key to success? There's always a little bit of luck involved, but I always say you have to buy enough lottery tickets to get lucky. So they obviously are very skilled in what they're doing. What have you taken away from them in just a couple minutes that you can describe?
The first thing that comes to me is, the lessons from Dave Lowell, the octogenarian prospector who found 17 ore bodies. This is spread through to all the other successful people I've seen in the space. And the business is about taking shots, and you have to have permission to be wrong. You have to take shots. You have to take chances. You certainly want to be diversified, whether it's in multiple junior companies or if you're running your own junior company, to have more than one drill target or have the ability to generate new ideas. You need to turn stuff over. You need investors with an understanding of and tolerance for failure and risk. But it's a business about taking shots, and it can reward you extremely well in a discovery scenario or in a rising price environment. And it's guts more than anything, I think. And the promoter's job is a pretty good job, right? They're they get a lot of flack, but they're the ones promoting these ideas and getting other people to buy in, and it can be an extreme value creator for them. But for an investor judging the space, it's obviously really tough, and you need multiple kicks at the can and some staying power, because it's all about the cycles, right? And we're both shy of 30, you and I, and we'll probably see 4 or 5 cycles. And I think you need some staying power and some luck and some duration to build a real fortune in this space. I'm sure you agree, but there are times to reap and times to sow and plant your seeds and times to sell assets. And certainly I hope that I'm using a heck of a lot of my principal to invest in some of these stories, but hopefully 2 or 3 cycles from now, where we'll just be using the interest from money we made in early on in our careers to bet in some of these high-risk situations. So staying power and risk-taking, really. What about you? I mean, you talk to so many great people too. What do you think is the keys for people in this biz?
Well, the cycle is absolutely key, in my opinion. I've seen this going back to 2000, and the saying of when the wind blows hard enough, the turkeys will even fly could not be more true than in this sector. So timing is of the essence. Even investing 2 years too early in some of the best stories, you're going to lose 75% of your money, and that is hard to overcome. So second to that, in a bad market, you have to be behind the right management teams, and that's why I like reading your content, because you are getting behind the big guys, and they're able to protect the stocks, continue to raise money, and bring news out in a bad market, and that's key for investors. But this sector is certainly not for everybody. It can wipe you out if you don't know what you're doing, and it's wiped out a lot of people, and hopefully we don't have too much longer to go.
Yeah, well, fate all changes with the drill hole, and you can be the CEO that people cross the street when they see you walking down, and they avoid you, and you can be dog's breakfast, and you pop one drill hole, and all of a sudden you're the most celebrated executive and made for the next 5 or 10 years. So I think you just got to get comfortable with taking a lot of risk, And every time I've ever made a good investment in this business, I was really uneasy when I wrote the check, right? And every time I thought I was doing something that was a no-brainer, it ended up kind of fucking me over. So it's about risk and reward, and I think we're both setting up for it. And our readers and subscribers, both to your platform and also ours, I think will be ahead of the curve when it happens. Because right now, information around discovery, nobody cares, but there's a time when it's really valuable to have context about situations, companies, and projects, and to have that information quickly when the wind's at your back. It's going to be very valuable to us. So we just got to have staying power, Colin, and our subscribers and readers do too. And if there's anything more that we can be doing for Palisade listeners and vice versa, you let me know, because I like working with other young media guys doing their own content and having their own voice. And I think it's kind of up to guys like us to re-engage the market and let the world know that this things change and it won't stay down forever. So we should just get back to it.
That's right. And one thing that we were talking about before we hit record today was when the market turns, and we even have to remind ourselves of this sometimes because we've gone through 4 terrible years, things can turn fast, and the amount of money that you'll make back. We just put out an update yesterday with Jordan Roy Byrne at the Daily Gold, and he was comparing how the HUI recovers when the bottom is finally hit. And you're talking that index is going up 200% within 7 to 14 months on any end of a bear market in the sector. So people have to stick around, they have to get engaged, and this is where you can make a fortune.
I've got a buddy that turned $100,000 into $17 million in 18 months at the end of 2009, 10, and the beginning of 2011. 100 grand to 17 million in a year and a half. And it happened because he's a degenerate and he rolled it in always to the next deal, to the next deal. He was like parlaying the profits and took an enormous amount of risk to get there. But it can be really dramatic, and I think the hard part for our space, and this has happened to me recently, is one of the companies that we covered on the sites just become a 10-bagger, and I hadn't seen a gain in so long. I was out of it at a 5 times return, and obviously that helped. But holding on when the market is with you is going to be just as tough as taking profits, I think. So. Anyway, there is already a sort of a selective bull market, I think, and you're seeing some securities are performing, and we got to find companies with CEOs that can find new audiences for their story and new shareholders and potentially market to audiences that aren't the Vancouver and Toronto sort of tired scene. I think there's a market for resources out there, and we'll have our day in the sun soon.
Yeah, we'll have to end the interview here soon. We're going on a bit long, but your buddy who turned 100,000 into 17 million was probably following a strategy that I've seen, and that is investing in a private placement and using those proceeds to invest quickly into the next private placement and collecting warrants, because it's very hard in a sector that moves up as quickly as the mining sector to beat that strategy. Even the best guys in the industry as brokers have trouble beating a strategy like that. So that's an interesting thing that you bring up there.
Well, yeah, we made a video with this guy at PDAC. He's a funny guy. It'll be out in a few weeks. Yeah, his character is prone to gambling, and I think that was a strategy. It's buying cheap stocks with full warrants, and that financing mechanism is dilutive for the company, but it sure can be good to the investors when you're making money on your equity and you've got a right to buy another share at some cheap price. It can be really incredible, but it sort of sets up the sector to fail again, because warrant financings dilute the shit out of these companies. Like Lukas Lundin hates them, and the one stock I want to mention today is called North Arrow Minerals, and Lukas is a big investor in it. Has no warrants and less than 50 million shares out, and they're developing a large diamond asset in Canada's north. And I think as an investor, if you're going to play in the market only and not buy financings, look for companies that aren't selling warrants. But if you're, if you're playing with the big boys in the private placements, yeah, you're damn right. You want to get as much exposure as you can. So that's why they need good brokers. And like I don't know where you do your work, but I'm a raving fan of the young brokers I work with at Haywood Securities, and there's still a few these venture specialists left out there, and they can make you a lot of money because they're the ones with the access. But it's tough for mom and pops to get in some of these things. But just curiously, like what I know you're an international guy. Like, do you use a broker, or do you just use direct with the company yourself?
Well, we're typically participating in private placements, and as you know, you always have to deal with some type of premium broker to get those shares deposited. So you're right. There are some young guys in the business, and there's some people certainly to work with that can bring good deal flow, but you have to do your own due diligence.
So, well, yeah, that's the one last thing. If there's one takeaway, it's kind of every man for themselves a bit, and people every time you hear a mining investor talk, you just assume they're full of they're spewing their own garbage on you, and they're talking their own books, and everybody's biased. So you really do have to be responsible for your own decisions and never betting more than you can afford to lose on any one of these scenarios. But Colin, thank you so much for having me on here, and I really look forward to having a chat like this, and when all the boats are floating and we're the toast of the town.
Absolutely, Tommy. Thanks so much for coming on. All of our listeners, if you don't already know about it, CEO.CA is one of the best websites in the business. Definitely go there and check it out. And Tommy's publishing every day. Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you so much, Colin.
Think you understand the junior mining sector, and you think that the participants in the mining sector, junior mining sector, are good people and kind people, hit the bid.
And the world is always going to need raw materials. It's going to need copper and gold and nickel and so forth.
Totally destabilized. Hey, Troll, did you hear what's going on in Yemen, or are you too stupid?